February 303 AD in the imperial capital of Nicomedia, an edict is posted in the city square that will transform the Roman Empire into a machinery of systematic terror. Emperor Gaius Aurelius Valerius Diocletianus has just signed the first of 4 decrees that will ignite what history remembers as the Great Persecution, the most calculated and brutal campaign ever waged against Christians in the ancient world. This isn't a spontaneous outbreak of mob violence. This is policy. Diocletian, influenced by his co-Augustus Galerius and traditionalist Roman priests, has decided that Christianity represents an existential threat to imperial unity. The Christians reject the imperial cult, refuse to sacrifice to Rome's ancestral gods, and their growing numbers suggest a parallel power structure that answers to no emperor. The solution, as Diocletian sees it, is total eradication. The edict doesn't merely restrict Christian worship, it criminalizes existence itself. Churches must be demolished, sacred texts must be burned. Christian gatherings are outlawed. Any Christian holding public office, even those of senatorial or equestrian rank, must be dismissed immediately. The intent is unmistakable. Christianity must be erased from Roman society as if it never existed. Eusebius of Caesarea, writing in his ecclesiastical history, describes what followed with horrifying clarity. Soldiers stormed churches across the eastern provinces, tearing down altars, looting sanctuaries, and burning scriptures in public squares. In Nicomedia itself, the Grand Church was razed to the ground under imperial orders on the very day the edict was posted. That same week, Christian bishops were arrested en masse. Some were tortured for refusing to surrender sacred texts, others were executed outright. What had been intermittent and localized persecution for 2 centuries became under Diocletian an official empire-wide policy of state-sponsored terror. The edict legitimized systematic torture, imprisonment, and public execution, all justified as necessary to preserve Rome's ancestral gods and imperial unity. But Diocletian understood something crucial about destroying a movement. You don't just attack the followers, you decapitate the leadership. Between 303 and 305 AD, the Roman Empire launched a coordinated extermination campaign specifically targeting Christian bishops. This wasn't collateral damage. This was intentional destruction of the Christian command structure, carried out through systematic torture, mutilation, and theatrical execution designed to break both bodies and spirits. In Nicomedia, Bishop Anthimus was captured and subjected to prolonged interrogation. According to Eusebius, he was scourged with metal-tipped whips that tore flesh from bone, then paraded through the streets, a warning before being beheaded. His severed head was displayed in the city center to terrorize the local Christian population. In Alexandria, Peter of Alexandria, a revered theologian and bishop, was arrested in secret. Lactantius recounts that Peter was imprisoned in total darkness for months, deprived of adequate food, and regularly beaten before being dragged to his execution and beheaded. The bishops of North Africa faced some of the most horrific fates. Felix of Thebeuca, who refused to surrender the scriptures, was subjected to red-hot metal branding across his face and chest. His skin was scorched, while Roman guards forced open his mouth and attempted to burn scripture pages before his eyes, a symbolic destruction of the word through the body of its guardian. He was eventually burned alive. These executions were public, ritualized, and strategically coordinated. The aim was terror through spectacle. Bishops weren't merely killed. They were broken, both physically and symbolically. Their bodies became warnings displayed in marketplaces and city gates. Their blood became offerings to the empire's offended gods. Their enforced silence became the empire's command. Rome had transformed martyrdom into theater, and under Diocletian's will, the bishops of the early church became the tortured foundation stones of a persecuted faith. But the bishops weren't the only ones who faced the flames. If you believe these forgotten stories of faith and terror deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. History, it just dates and emperors. It's the voices of those who suffered under power's cruelest machinery, and their stories need witnesses across the centuries. Now let's continue into the heart of Diocletian's nightmare, where fire became a weapon of the state. Among the most horrific spectacles of the Great Persecution were the public burnings, executions designed not merely to kill, but to intimidate, silence, and destroy Christian identity in full view of Roman citizens. These burnings, carried out across the empire between 303 and 305 AD, were staged in city centers, theaters, and military camps, serving as both punishment and propaganda. According to Eusebius in his Martyrs of Palestine, entire groups of Christians were condemned to the flames for refusing to sacrifice to the Roman gods. In cities like Nicomedia, Caesarea, and Antioch, pyres were constructed in public squares. Those who persisted in their refusal were bound, doused in oil, and thrown alive into the fire. These weren't spontaneous acts of mob violence. They were ordered by Roman governors under imperial edict and executed with military precision. One of the earliest recorded mass burnings occurred in Nicomedia shortly after the first edict, when a fire broke out in the imperial palace. Blame fell on the Christians, and as a result executions intensified dramatically. Eusebius notes that men and women, young and old, were committed to the flames in mass executions. Some were burned with their scriptures clutched in their hands, the empire intending not only to erase lives, but sacred memory itself. Lactantius, in his work on the deaths of the persecutors, describes how Christian women were burned alive after being stripped and paraded publicly through the streets. In Phrygia, an entire Christian village, including a church filled with worshippers, was reportedly surrounded and set ablaze under orders from the regional governor. No one was permitted to escape. The doors were barred from the outside. Burning carried deep symbolic weight. Fire in Roman ritual was purifying, cleansing, transformative. But here it was weaponized to exterminate. The act served dual purposes. It destroyed the body irreversibly, and it denied Christians traditional burial, a final calculated insult to their belief in bodily resurrection. These executions weren't just punishments. They were public warnings engineered to incite fear and enforce obedience through carefully orchestrated spectacle. But fire wasn't the only tool in Diocletian's arsenal of terror. The Roman state reactivated one of its most feared and theatrical methods of execution, damnatio ad bestias, the condemnation of Christians to death by wild beasts in public arenas. This method, rooted in earlier imperial persecutions, now became a calculated and systematic form of state terror, ordered across multiple provinces and overseen by imperial governors tasked with enforcing Diocletian's anti-Christian edicts. Eusebius provides graphic accounts of mass executions carried out in the amphitheater of Caesarea Maritima. There, Christians were dragged into the arena before roaring crowds and torn apart by lions, leopards, and bears. The condemned were stripped, shackled, and left defenseless, many praying aloud as the gates opened and the beasts were released. Some were first scourged or mutilated to heighten the spectacle for the bloodthirsty crowds. In 304 AD, a particularly brutal instance occurred in the city of Tyre. Eusebius recounts how both men and women were paraded into the arena. Some were pierced with iron hooks before being released to the animals. Others were tied to stakes while wild beasts circled them. Even children were not spared the horror. Roman authorities staged these events with chilling deliberation, often aligning them with public festivals to maximize attendance and reinforce imperial power through entertainment. In North Africa, martyr accounts reflect the continuity of these methods during the Diocletianic era. Eyewitnesses described Christians kneeling in prayer as beasts lunged, refusing to flee or recant even as death approached. The purpose was terror through entertainment. The arenas served as both execution chambers and instruments of psychological warfare. Executions by beasts were choreographed public rituals meant to display Rome's dominance over both nature and dissent. They weaponized fear, humiliation, and spectacle to send an unmistakable message. Any refusal to bow to the gods of Rome would end not in quiet death but in public, agonizing obliteration of body and faith. Yet something unexpected happened. The more brutally Rome tried to crush Christianity, the more it spread. The blood of martyrs became the seed of the Church. Every public execution intended to terrorize instead inspired. Every broken body displayed as a warning became a symbol of unbreakable faith. Within a decade of Diocletian's great persecution, Constantine would legalize Christianity. Within a generation, it would become the dominant religion of the empire. The machinery of terror that Diocletian built to destroy a faith instead forged it into something Rome itself could not survive without. Power, no matter how absolute, cannot extinguish what people believe in their hearts. And sometimes, the very cruelty meant to destroy becomes the foundation of something greater. How do you think acts of extreme violence can backfire and strengthen what they seek to destroy? Share your thoughts in the comments below.